Hello. In this episode, we are continuing my business journey story from a new, older, wiser perspective. I haven't told my full story in quite some time. So I thought it was time to give an update. Now, I've already done a part one. So if you are wanting to listen in order and capture the real beginning of my story, I would recommend you go and listen to part one first and then come back to this episode. I'm thinking we're going to be able to wrap it up by the end of this one. I'm pretty sure. But we are going to be talking about how over the years I went from playing it very safe in my creations, in my content, to eventually unleashing my voice, claiming my power, losing followers, losing friends, and then ultimately unlocking a level of revenue, resonance, and freedom that I never thought was ever possible for myself. We're going to cover the seasons of doubt, the bold pivots, and the undeniable truth that I ultimately learned. When you stop chasing the business and results that you think you should want and move toward what it is that you actually want unapologetically and all freaking in, that is when the real magic happens. If you have ever wondered what it really looks like to go from invisible to influential to undeniable, this episode is for you. Let's dive into part two. Welcome to All In with Allie, the podcast for online business owners and entrepreneurs who are ready to create the life and business of their dreams. I am so happy you are here. All right. So yeah, part one, we've covered quite a bit, and where we ended was in the beginning of 2019. Okay. So I started this business that I have today in 2018. I spent a pretty good amount of the year, which also is the same year that I had my first son cruise. And I spent the bulk of the year getting ready to get ready, right? Like just trying to perfect a course, perfecting a brand, whatever that means, and thinking that I was going to be this next coming of Amy Porterfield and millionaire after my first launch. But lo and behold, after spending 9-ish months on creating and quote unquote perfecting a course, I made, a couple $100. But that did not stop me. I fired all of my paying consultation or consult clients and went all in anyway, because that's just the level of Delulu. You think Delulu is new for me now? No, this is somehow, some way in my blood, in my DNA. If I learned how to make $1, and I believe if you can make one, you can make a billion. And that's where I was. And that's where I still am. So I went all in. I fired all of my paying clients, not listening to advice of anybody who cared about me or loved me, including my husband. And I somehow understood the value of my time. And I did that. And for a good 3-4-ish months, maybe tiny bit more, it was a serious struggle. It was really, really hard because I didn't know when traction was going to take place. You don't know. There's no time where it's like, oh, you've put in X amount of time, X amount of effort into your business. You can be successful now. That's not how that works. You don't really know. And everybody's journey is so different. So I didn't know if it was going to be a year of really struggling. When I say struggling, I couldn't pay my bills. And yes, I had the support of Chris, but our situation was so different. And during this time, I'm still having to work the oddest of hours, navigating life as a new mom. Chris, like I said in last episode, was commuting back and forth to Nashville. He was gone just about 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single day. So for me to run my business, I had to get up at 0 o'clock in the morning, work during, whatever nap times that crews would have during the day, and hustle as much as I could while he was awake. And we know how that goes. And then whenever Chris would get home, I would take calls until 8, 9 o'clock, sometimes 10 o'clock at night, and create content and do whatever I could to prep myself for the next day and the coming days. So I was truly burning the candle at both ends. But at some point by doing this, and I'm trying to remember what I was doing at this point, I was doing whatever I possibly could to get clients. So I launched this course. I very quickly realized that I didn't know how to launch. It's one thing to create a course, and also the course was okay. Like the knowledge was good for sure, but I didn't know how to make a course. Like I did invest in some courses to like learn how to make a course, as many of us have done. But it was as amateur gets. And I quickly learned I didn't know how to launch. I didn't know how to sell. I just had this thing and I had this knowledge and I barely even knew how to talk it on a camera at this time. So anyway, I was navigating all of this insecurity, and truly every day felt like I was taking on a scary monster because everything felt so new and I was so green and I wanted to win so badly and I just wanted to be successful and I just wanted to help people because I knew that I had skills and I had knowledge, but to market that and get that in front of people in a way that makes them trust you and want to buy into you is a whole other story and ballgame that I had to learn the hard way. So this was it was such a, it was such a trying season, but such a blessing as well, because I met myself in that season. I became a leader in that season in so many different ways. I had to commit and recommit every single day to this, what felt like at the time a pie in the sky dream that I was, kind of foolish to go after, knowing what I know now and the level of knowledge and experience that I had. But I did it day in and day out. And I was taking clients. I was doing a lot of one-on-one work. I would do, one-off calls, strategy sessions, those sort of things. I was starting to do and sell some live trainings and some smaller trainings because my first course was a very robust course. Think like multiple modules, covered, lots of topics, very broad topic. So I started to break that apart and sell that into smaller courses. If anybody was around during that time, one of the courses, the only one that I remembered that I did was LOA Bay, Law of Attraction Bay, because this was around the time that it's not the first time that I started learning about Law of Attraction. I had been into it for years, but it was the first time that I started kind of dipping my toe into talking about the power of your mind. And that felt so bold to me. And that felt so, I don't know, it felt scary because it was not the type of topic that people talk about as much today. So it felt very strange to talk about that, but it was what I was doing and it was the way that I was managing my mind. And I was, journaling and I was speaking into existence things I wanted and practicing feeling the thoughts that I knew that I would feel or I thought I would feel once I quote unquote made it. So, and it was starting to work for me, right? Like I was starting to get clients and I was starting to get this traction. So I was like, I have to teach this to everybody. This stuff works. So anyway, that was one of the courses or little classes that I did. And I was just hustling, man. I was creating as much content as I could. and just teaching my little heart out. Around this time too is when Instagram stories became a thing. I don't remember exactly when, but it was around this time, which is so funny because it feels like they've always been around, but they haven't. And at the time, I think stories were like, I think 10 or 15 seconds long. And I was not practiced at the art of being able to, one, say anything. Like, I was not articulate at all. I wasn't succinct. I wasn't a speaker, right? I never had to speak publicly. I wasn't practiced at speaking at all. And all of a sudden we have this platform where now we need to speak on stories. And this is becoming more of a thing. So I challenged myself where I would do these stories. And I think I started this as a weekly thing where I started a series. It was something for moms. And my whole point, because at the time I was like, maybe my niche will be moms. I'm this new mom. A lot of moms follow me. Maybe that can kind of be my thing, as many of us have done. And I started this series where I would teach some sort of lesson, some sort of topic as it relates to social media for moms on stories. And I kid you not, I would have like 100 stories live. It would take me hours, and I mean hours, to record these stories. It was so frustrating. And it never dawned on me just to I would try and make them shorter, but I didn't understand how to create content in that way yet. I just would pick a topic and it would take however long it would take. Anyway, I'm just giving examples of what life looked like. I was just doing anything and everything to give value. And I did, and it had begun working. So like I had said, eventually we made 6 figures in 6 months. But in this time, I also knew leading up to this, toward the end of 2018, this was also when, I'm backing up just a bit. This was also when podcasting became a bit more of a thing that quote unquote normal people did. For a while, it was just these bigger personalities, and some famous people did it, but podcasting obviously wasn't even close to what it is today. Now, everybody and their mom, it seems, has a podcast, and that's great. But around the time that I had started thinking about having a podcast was when, again, more normal people were starting to dip their toe and show that, yeah, anybody can have a podcast. So I'd always thought in my mind, okay, I love that. I had been listening to podcasts. That's ultimately what made me want to start my business was, like I said, listening to Amy Porterfield and Jenna Kutcher. And shout out Joel Solomon. She was one of the OGs I was listening to and really admired at the time. And so I knew at some point I would also want to do one, but the time was not right. Not even close, right? Number one, was barely getting results in my business. I had no free time, no free energy, had no clue what I was doing as a mom. I was barely getting by. So the seed was planted. And okay, so now we're fast forwarding back into 2019. And spring of 2019, I was on a walk with Cruz and the dogs. And I remember the exact spot that I was in. I was rounding a corner and I think I was listening to a podcast, as I did often. And the only way that I can describe it is I got this feeling, I got this knowing that the time to start a podcast is now. That's the best way I can say it. It was oh God, I need to start this podcast right this second. Right this second. I don't know why, but that was it. And I've learned how things work for me. Anytime that I get any kind of what I consider a bigger idea that's going to require some sort of change or shift in my life, it starts as a seed that's planted and then comes a knowing. And I immediately came home and got on a call with Kate Howard, who does my podcast to this day, because she was a client of mine at the time. She was one of the very first people to join my very first mastermind. That was another thing I was doing. I'd launched a mastermind, and she was one of the very first in this mastermind. She was one of the very first to invest in me and what I was doing, because at the time she was working a corporate job and she wanted to also, she was playing around with the idea of starting her own business as well. And as a side hustle, I had learned from her that she and her husband, Philip, were helping friends with podcasts. And they had like a couple of offers around it. And this was like a thing that they were doing. So I immediately came home. I got on a call with Kate and I was like, I think I'm ready. Like, talk to me. How can you help me? I have no clue what I'm doing. And they were such an important part of that moment and story, because it was their confidence and also their support in me, and also like their knowledge in podcasting that helped me feel confident enough to really go for it. So within about a month or so of that moment, we launched my podcast, which at the time was called Six Figure Influencer. And I titled it Six Figure Influencer before I hit six figures in the current business that I had. Okay. So this was kind of a risk. It was kind of a gamble, but I had hit six figures in my other business. I knew I was going to do it. And this was just kind of a manifestation speaking into existence. I wish in hindsight I had called it seven-figure influencer. Would have been cool if I named it eight-figure influencer, but we said six. And then, like I said, within a few months later, we hit six figures in that business. And I share this about the podcast, and I love telling this story because, we just celebrated 300 episodes for this podcast, which is so insane. Like, the fact that I'm still doing this several years later. I have missed a couple of weeks for sure, but for the most part have barely skipped a beat. And I'm really proud of that. But what makes that so fascinating, and the reason why I love telling this story, is because when I started my podcast, it made no sense to start a podcast for me. It made no sense. I was so green, like I said, in my business. I had no time, no energy, and not to mention, like I've already explained, I didn't know how to speak. I didn't have an eloquent fiber in my body, okay? I didn't know how to speak. I had never spoken on a mic before. I had barely spoken on camera at this point. And now all of a sudden, I'm trying to be a podcaster. So I remember, I hired Kate and Philip. Actually, well, I'll backtrack in just a second because I'm not trying to bounce everywhere. I hired Kate and Philip. They're my third business investment. I'll tell you what the first two were in just a second. They were my third. I could not afford them in the moment. Okay. I guess like technically I could because we had the money. Financially, if I had a financial advisor, they probably would have been like, you need to figure out how to do it yourself or don't do it yet. If I had asked Chris, he would have said the same thing. But I knew if I did not hire Kate and Philip to take this podcast and edit it and put it out into the world, it would have never gotten out to the world. I didn't have time to sit down and record it, let alone anything else. Like, I was already so stretched to the max. And I just went into it truly hand on a Bible with blind faith. And I was like, you know what? I have enough money to hire them for this launch. And if I have to fire them after the first month because I don't have the money to pay, I really am going to hate to do that, but so be it. And I never looked back. I have paid Kate and Philip every single month since spring of 2018, since that moment. And I had no clue where that money would come from. And I truly believe the reason why is because I was meant to start that podcast. And this is how this goes, guys. I'm telling you, There are going to be things that you just know in your body and you don't know why you know it. And when you think about it logically and you try and make it make sense, there are going to be a lot of times it will not make sense. You can't make it make sense. And if you wait for it to make sense to take action, you likely will be waiting a really, really long time. But I just trusted there's a reason why I feel this way. There's a reason why things have lined up in the way that they have to make it possible for me to do this. I want to do it. And I'm going to trust that if I am meant to do this, I will be supported some way, somehow. And when I started the podcast, the business just kept growing. And like I said, thankfully, never had to look back. And I've been with Kate and Philip ever since, which is incredible. But y'all, I started recording the podcast. The only quiet place in the house we were in our old house at the time. And we had this it was a walk-in closet. So we had this closet filled with clothes, which was perfect. And I put my little laptop up on a laundry thing, flipped upside down, and would just record. We weren't doing video at the time. And I stumbled through probably the first 10, 20, maybe even 30 episodes. I cried through probably the first 10. I had to record and re-record and re-record and re-record and re-record so many times that I would be furious and just so utterly frustrated with myself that finally was like, the only way I can do this is if I script it. So then I had to write the damn episodes, and these were not short episodes. And I would write them all out, and I had to write them in the way that I spoke, and then I would have to read them. But I didn't feel confident enough at the time to stumble over words. So anytime that I would mess up, I would have to go back and I would have to re-record. And I mean, like during our weekends, I had to do this on the weekends. So the only time that I had with Chris and the only free time that I really had with Cruz, I would be in a closet stumbling through and crying through recording episodes until I finally got to a point where I could string more than 2 sentences together without messing up and crying. That's how we started. And by doing and stumbling, I got better. Simple as that. And finally kind of got into a groove, and then I was finally able to stop scripting myself, and I was finally able to start keeping just very loose notes, and simply became more practiced at the art of speaking. You cannot get better at anything without doing, okay? So that's how we got here. But anyway, so that's how I started the podcast. Like I said, that was spring of 2019. And really, that next year into 2020, I'm trying to think if anything really happened after that. That was pretty standard. I remember I had my first 20K month that summer, which was a really big deal. I still remember that moment. I still remember texting Chris. I was on my way to a nail appointment and I refreshed PayPal and it was like right at the end of the month and we had hit 20K and I just was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I had like that was such a huge goal for me. I could not fathom $20,000 in my bank account just from 1 month. That was so wild to me. Because if you remember, my big goal prior to that was 10K months. That was like the dream for my whole life as a childhood. That was like the peak. That was the highest that a girl could dream, was 10K months. And to double that was like unheard of in my little world. And I remember I did that, which was really fun. And I think the moment that Chris was like, damn, like he started to kind of really understand the lack of ceiling that was happening here. And I think that was the time that I had officially surpassed him, which was a really cool moment for us and really interesting. And so anyway, so that happened. Let's see, 2020, we moved into our new house. And it was just business as usual. I was a little bit more practiced, a little bit more skillful. I was better at speaking. I was better at training. I had launched several different trainings. I had my mastermind going. I had taken, dozens and dozens and dozens of private clients. So I was becoming very skilled at working with people and just getting comfortable working with women and assessing them and understanding what they needed and their mindset and their blocks and reading between the lines. Like I was just becoming more practiced at the art of being a coach and being a mentor and what that meant. And at the same time, I was becoming more practiced at the art of running a business. Because even though I was teaching social media, I was doing everything on my own in terms of my business. The only thing that I was outsourcing at this time was the podcast. So from the marketing to the back end to everything, to branding, to social media content, to creating offers, to launching offers, I was doing it all and navigating it all like I was walking through a dark room, bumping up against walls. Like, okay, there's a wall there. Can't go there. Okay. And just like fumbling my way through running a business and figuring it out. So by 2020, we moved into this new house. And I remember, coming into this house, I definitely felt way more confident in what I was doing. My launches were getting bigger. I had quite the audience. And the pandemic happened, right? So that got really weird. And I remember while there was a lot of uncertainty in terms of careers in general, right? Like especially for people and, Chris in corporate and I mean the world, like nobody knew what was going on. But for businesses as well, there was just, we didn't know if our businesses were going to be okay, let alone if we were going to live till tomorrow. So it was such an odd time. But the fascinating part was my business didn't miss a beat. Like, as a matter of fact, I think we just continued to climb because we had more eyeballs then. And more people were open to the idea of online business and needing to come up with a creative solution to bring in money. So leading through that was interesting. And I learned a lot, but I learned more than anything that I had built a business that was sustainable. And I was not only surviving in that time, we were really, I would consider what we were doing was thriving during 2020, which I'm really, really proud of. So anyway, I kept that moving. I was still focused on social media. Gosh, this is when TikTok had its big moment. I first went on TikTok. This is when Reels became a thing. I was one of the first to like really jump on the Reel train. That was probably the first thing that first and only thing really that I was an early adopter on. I'm not really normally an early adopter type person, but with Reels, I was already on Instagram and doing the damn thing. So I was like, well, we gotta do this. And I just knew, like, take advantage. And that was amazing for business. And, I was helping people learn Reels, which was really fun. But still very, very focused on social media. And I'd really obviously, like, I was the social media girl at the time. And I was making money, but we were doing okay. But I wasn't satisfied with the rate of growth that we were experiencing. And I remember that, I've always been a big journaler. And I just remember that was always something that bugged me. I kind of always felt like my growth was it just felt like getting to that next level was really complicated. And also, if I was being honest at the time, I didn't love that I was typecasting myself as the social media girl because I didn't give two shits about social media, right? Like, I understood the value of social media. I'm appreciative of social media in the same way that I am today, but I didn't want to be the poster girl for reels or for hashtags, right? Like I was creating these and having these huge launches around hashtag like a boss. And I was like, oh God, put a bullet in my head if I have to talk about hashtags again. Like it was just, like something wasn't feeling good anymore. And in hindsight, I can see that no doubt that's why my financial success and growth had began to plateau, because I believe that had God allowed me to continue to grow, and let's say like I really blew up during this time and just like started making the type, maybe the money that I'm making today or the 50K months that I was going for at the time, maybe I never would have pivoted into what I'm doing now, but like at the time it was like, this is working. It's okay, but it's not working at the level that I wanted to. And it started to feel like what it was feeling like when I was managing social media, right? Like when I had to pop pills just to do my work. And I was like, okay, I don't want to start feeling this way again. I've been here. What do we need to do? So the seed was planted again that a pivot was likely on the horizon, but I didn't really understood, like I didn't know what that would look like. So now we're like getting to the end of 2020. We're going into 2021. And I don't know exactly when it was. I think it was more into the summer of 2021 that this got to a boiling point with me. And the only reason why it took me so long to take action and to officially pivot is because I didn't know what I would do. I had no freaking clue what I was going to pivot into. I had ideas, and I'm trying to remember if I can remember any of the ideas of what it was, but I was like, I don't really know what that would look like. And then I just kind of had this moment, I guess, where I realized that I had so much more wisdom and knowledge that I could not only bring to the table, but I could monetize, right? Like I said, while running my business, I was learning how to run a business. While launching and marketing myself and failing again and again and again, and then succeeding again and again and again, I was learning how to launch, and I was learning how to sell, and I was learning how to create these offers that sold, right? I went from selling offers or trying to sell offers that I felt like I couldn't pay people to get into to creating offers that sold really well. So it's like, okay, there's obviously incredible skills in that. And again, there was like this added emphasis of the power of energy and the power of our minds. And that was something that I felt really, really drawn to. Not only that I was interested in, but what I was actually doing behind the scenes. And I was talking about with clients, closer proximity, but I wasn't allowing myself to infiltrate in my overall messaging. I was still being very, very safe online and just keeping it very status quo, very, what you would expect of a social media girly on the internet. So anyway, Mompreneur Monday. That's what it was. Okay, the series on stories back in 2008, it was Mompreneur Monday. Also, before I continue the story, the first two things I invested in, because I said I would mention that too. The very first business investment that I ever made was hiring somebody to clean our house. And if you're thinking that's not an investment in your business, think again. That absolutely is an investment. If it affects you, it affects your business. And this was the very first thing that I ever paid for out of my business money. It was a very similar situation to the podcast, right? I was like, I can afford it this month. I don't know if I'll be able to afford it next month, but I need help. because like I said, I already told you the schedule situation. When I was first starting, I was working odd hours. I was trying to cram any kind of work that I could into any free time that I had. And I also happen to love a clean house, right? So I really was working against myself. And on the weekends, this is before I had a podcast. So on the weekends, when Chris was home and I should be spending time with my family, I would be deep cleaning the house and we would be spending our time doing that. I was like, I can't do this, right? Like, I can't uphold a house and run a business and keep a child alive and keep myself alive. I can't. Like, there's no freaking way. So we hired a house cleaner. I think we started with like that 1 time a month deep cleaning, and then we graduated to 2 times a month. And then eventually we graduated to 1 time a week, which was wild, absolutely wild. And today I have the same house cleaner. No, she's not the same. She's now different, but she's been with us since 2021, I think, Maria. And she comes twice a week. Maria does. And it's one of the best investments that I make. And I've kept her employed since 2021. And it's been amazing. But it was the same thing. Like, once we got started, I never looked back. And it was such a game changer. And it saved me so much time and so much energy. And it uplifted my spirits. And it allowed me to be able to focus on doing what I should be doing, which is making money and creating value. So anyway, that was the first investment. The second investment that I made in my business was hiring my first coach, Sarah Dan. And I definitely couldn't afford her because her prices were, for me, crazy at the time. $2,500 a month for a mastermind. I said, F it, let's go. I put it on a credit card. Chris said no. I did it anyway. That caused a huge issue, but apologize later. And that worked out great because I learned amazing skills from her. I love Sarah Dan. She'll forever be my first coach. So that was my second. And then the third was hiring podcast team. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to land that plane. Moving on. So now we're in the summer of 2021. And finally, like I've reached this boiling point. I have to make a change. And I can't remember exactly how I did it, but I think it was kind of just like a slow but steady moment where I was like, this is what we're talking about now. I'm not talking about hashtags. I'm not talking about reels. I'm not gonna, I shifted the conversation. I didn't come on and make an announcement like, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I will not be the social media guru anymore. I just started talking about the things that I wanted to talk about. I started talking about launching. I started talking about creating offers. I started talking about energy and human design and all of the things that I was genuinely doing and that was genuinely changing my life. And also the things that I was helping clients with that I wasn't brave enough to talk about in the public eye because I was scared of what people would think and if they would still want to follow me and, the whole thing. And I also started shifting the conversation around the podcast to more of these energetic conversations. And I remember praying about this. And I pray over my content. I pray over my business often, daily, almost daily. And I just remember praying to God, like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. It feels like the right thing to do. If it's the right thing to do, please let the right people hear me. Please let the right people understand me and get value from this, and let the wrong people just miss it, because I wasn't, now like I can handle negative comments. I can handle people not getting it. I didn't have that at the time. I was very concerned with public opinion. I was very concerned and had this very strong people-pleasing tendency about me at the moment. And I deeply feared people disliking me and more than anything, misunderstanding me. So I just prayed to God, please, God, just let the right people hear me and the wrong people not. That was my prayer. And I remember one of the first podcasts that I launched around this time, I put out and I was nervous about it, but it was me, and I let go, let God. And the most amazing thing started to happen. I started to receive messages from you saying the exact thing that I needed to hear, the exact thing that I had prayed for, saying like if I could have prayed like, God, I hope people think this exact thing. That's what people were messaging me. And they were messaging me like, whoa, where has this been? Whoa, I've been following you for years and I've liked your stuff, but all of a sudden you're speaking my language. All of a sudden, like, this is landing in a way that it's never landed before. Or people that are like, your show came up at the perfect time, was exactly what I need to hear. I love the way that you explain that. I love your energy. I love your rawness and your realness and the way that you explain things. And I love that it's not perfect. And I love that. Like, in my soul, I was like, these are God wings. I had no doubt about it. These are God wings. This is confirmation that God wants me to be who I am. That He created me on purpose, with the interests that I have on purpose, with the skills that I have on purpose. And I'm not meant to trap myself in a box that I don't want to be in. I'm allowed to grow. I'm allowed to change it up. And I am allowed to be who I am fully for the world to see if that's what I want. I don't need to put on a vanilla mask. I don't need to be vanilla ice cream so that more people want to enjoy me. And so that I'm more digestible to people. That is not why I was created. If I was created that way, great, but I wasn't. And I just got all of this divinely timed confirmation. I can hear you. What you're saying is landing. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for talking about this. Do you know how many negative comments I got around this time? Not one. Not one. I lost countless followers. Countless. But nobody decided to announce their departure like so many people love to do. Like anything that could have harmed the shred of confidence that I found to do this and would have made me force me to retreat back into my shell. It didn't happen. And I know that was a God thing, because we're meant to move forward. None of us are meant to stay put in places where we don't want to be. If you don't want to be there, move. You not wanting to be there is confirmation that you're not meant to be there. There needs to be a change. So I made this change. I got this confirmation and emboldened me. I continued to do this. I started to shift my offers. Another big thing that I did around this time was I started talking about money more. This was also a big deal. Nobody was really talking about money at the time. I think I was one of the first to really peel back the curtain and be the unclassy one and say, hey, this is what my back end is looking like. This is what I just made in this launch. This is what my payment notifications are looking like right now, to show what's possible. That did get a mixed response, but I was doing this because that's what I like to see. It was the women who came before me, right? The only reason why I was even in this position in 2021 is because Amy Porterfield, way back in 2016 or 15, dared to do it first, which was so brave. Like knowing what I know now, I mean, it's so like truly one of the first. And so anyway, and I love to see it, right? Like nothing inspired me more than the other women that I knew at the time who were doing this and who were bold enough to talk about the money that they were really making. Because again, it was all just there showing me what was possible. So I was like, well, if that lights me up, if that's inspiring me, if that's making me want to push harder and go for more, and if that's motivating to me, then I want to be motivating to people as well. So I started doing that. That was another thing that I shifted. And that was very well received by many, many people. And it was in this moment, this was the summer of 2021, my business exploded, like really started to take off. I had gone through like such long periods of the most tiny, minimal fractions of growth up until then. Just this up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, to now we're going up, right? We're going upwards. We're going from 20K months to 30K months to 40 to 50. And I hovered at 50 for a really, really long time. So anyway, that was summer of 2021. That was also the summer that I found Melanie. And, you know, they always say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I truly believe she appeared at the right time. And I know this because I remember seeing Melanie just on social media randomly. I remember it because she had such a distinct page at the time. You know, she had like that very, at the time it was a very, very dark, moody vibe. And not a lot of people were doing that. Really, nobody was doing that at the time. So I distinctly remember seeing her. But when I saw her previously, something about it, it wasn't time. And I didn't want to follow her at all. Like she would pop up and I was like, not for me. And then she did a joint masterclass with Amanda Francis. And I was following Amanda Francis. I was a fan of Amanda Francis at the time. And that was my first true introduction into Melanie. And I heard the woman speak and it changed my life. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? You can speak that well. You can talk about that. You can run a business that creates that. Like, again, it was another monumental, this is possible for you moment. So I got into her world. And what was great about Melanie is she took me out of this like super structured, your business has to operate this way. It has to look just like this. She showed me a more feminine path, which I deeply needed in the moment. In that moment, in that season, I needed almost like a course correction into a more feminine, flowy way of running a business, into a more feminine, flowy way of receiving success and money for my skills. So, you know, and I've shared about this, but that fall I was in her world. I had inquired about her mastermind. Her mastermind was $15,555 a month. I shit my pants and I was like, okay, well, you know, after I clean myself up and maybe in a year, I'll be ready to be in her world. And maybe one day I'll do our mastermind. And it was New Year's Eve of 2021. I had $20,000 that I needed to spend of business profit. Otherwise, I would have paid it to taxes. So I was like, where do I put this money? And there was only one place, the only place I could have invested in more affordable coaches. I could have invested it anywhere. The only place, the only person I wanted to pay that money to was her. And I shot her a DM. I said, Melanie, I want to be in your mastermind. I have $20,000. Can I please give this to you before midnight? And this was like 8:00 at night. I was like, she's probably throwing a huge party. She's not going to get back to me. Oh, she got back to me. She was like, yes, you can, you know, because she's smart. And, you know, we had an amazing conversation. I was put on a wait list. I paid her $20,000 and I was set to begin Unity Mastermind the following year in March. And I said, you know what? I could wait until next year to decide that I'm ready for this. I could wait for some elusive arbitrary date, some elusive arbitrary number for it to make sense, or I could decide to step into this new identity right now, something that I so badly want that I can't stop thinking about it. And I took one of the biggest leaps of my life in that moment. And I say all the time, I went to bed one way in 2021 and I woke up a brand new version of myself in 2022 for a couple of reasons. Because number one, I just made that huge, bold investment and declaration for me as a business owner, but also my imminent business success, which I was speaking into existence. I decided this is going to be the best business investment that I ever make. But then also, very early into 2022, I found out I was pregnant. Like, immediately, I was pregnant. And we still have a lot to cover. So I guess there is going to be a part 3. I'm going to leave you on that cliffhanger. And we will for sure wrap up the rest of this story in the next episode. I'm sorry, there's a lot to cover. I don't want to miss any details. So I hope you're enjoying this at least, but it's about to get good because I'm about to hit one of the best years of business in my life. There was a lot of speaking into existence. There was a lot of energy work going on, and we're going to get into it all, followed by a huge shock and downturn by the end of the year. So 2022 was one of the most pivotal years of my life. And that's already freaking 3 years ago. I can't do math to save my life. So anyway, we have a lot more to cover, I guess. We'll get into it. I love you. I'll see you here next week. Bye.